Hey, 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 everybody. Happy Thursday and welcome back to the stream. I feel a little self-conscious about my appearance now because I have just spent the last several hours doing a deep dive on the Sephora 10-year-olds. I don't know if you guys are fully aware of what's happening at Sephora these days. I've never been much of a Sephora person. I shopped at Ulta for a while in college, and then they decided they were just going to celebrate women with penises instead of biological women, so I don't shop there anymore. But I've never been much of a Sephora girl, and now I've done this whole deep dive into the entire generation of Gen Alpha 10-year-olds that are spending thousands upon thousands of dollars on skincare and makeup at Sephora. This face brought to you by sunburn and no foundation, and we're just living on a prayer over here with the dark circles, but that's a-okay. We've got a great stream lined up for you guys today, and to give you a little bit of a teaser into what I'm doing later today, I had a big flight cancellation that was supposed to happen really late tonight. My flight was supposed to leave at 9 o'clock. My flight ended up getting canceled, so I scrambled to get a new flight booked to where I am going later tonight. So I actually have to have a very hard out on the stream today. We have to be done by 3:40 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be a very quick, fun, to the point stream on something that absolutely is insane happening in my home state of Colorado, and more specifically in the city of Denver when it comes to the drug epidemic, the crime that is continuing to skyrocket with violent crime there in Denver, and just overall really bad policies when it comes to this idea of safe drug use or safe injection sites. Spoiler alert, there is literally no such thing. So we have a really quick stream today. I can't wait to tell you guys all about it. And then I am headed to the airport for a very last minute flight booking that I was not supposed to be on, but we're going to make it work because sometimes life throws you a curveball and you just have to be willing to run with it in every direction. I'm going to pick like 10 random people to say hi to really quick. Hello to Athena watching on Instagram and Jason watching on Instagram as well. We've got Crazy Cat Lady, Nitty Witty, Tito and Alex watching on Locals. Raj is kicking things off for us on Getter. John Best and StarCon over on Rumble. Hello, it's good to see you. Naruto, so glad you're back. And Uber Bad Boy is watching us over on YouTube. You guys are the best, and as we are starting the stream today, do me a huge favor. You guys know the drill, and don't forget to like the stream as we're getting started. That could look like a thumbs up or a heart, depending on where you're watching, and most importantly, especially if you're new around here and you haven't already, smash that follow or subscribe button wherever you guys are watching to help us continue to join this community in droves and grow this community for the people who really need another truth seeker in their life now more than ever. Okay, story time for today's stream. I got sent a link to this nonprofit organization from my friend Maggie a couple of weeks ago when I was going home to Colorado for Christmas. And it's this nonprofit called the Harm Reduction Action Center, which says that they are geared towards promoting public health and ideally combating the drug epidemic, particularly opioid-based drugs that are injected into your arms. If you have read anything in the last 5 to 10 years about the drug epidemic in America, you'll know that in particular, we are really struggling with opioid addiction, which could include fentanyl, that could be morphine, that could be heroin, or anything in between. But fentanyl is really the main drug that we are super concerned about in the United States today. Fentanyl overdoses were the leading cause of death for teenagers the last several years in America, and fentanyl is getting laced in the black market with all kinds of products that you would never expect that it would be laced with. So people are kind of just dropping dead like flies everywhere, and it's really, really unbelievably terrible. This has become a very specific problem in America's cities more than anything. And when I worked at the White House in 2018 was a huge focus of the then Trump administration to try to decrease the amount of opioid overdose deaths that were happening across the United States. They did a phenomenal job really decreasing that problem. And under this current White House administration, it's just become unbelievably out of control. But it's not the White House alone that is to blame for the continued drug epidemic in America. There's a lot of really bad policies happening at the state level for certain states in America. You can probably pick for yourselves what those states are based on common sense, and in particular certain cities, and you can probably pick out what cities those are for yourselves based on common sense. But if I were going to tell you as a child that someday Colorado would have become the poster child for everything that America was doing wrong, I would have thought you were crazy, right? As a kid, growing up in Colorado was this idyllic, wonderful storybook Hallmark movie experience that I would never have traded for the entire world. It honestly felt like growing up in a Hallmark movie. And I say that literally because they made a Hallmark movie about my hometown, Christmas in Evergreen, which was so darn cute. And I absolutely loved growing up there. I had wonderful friends. There was a really strong sense of community values, even in a bigger city like Denver. And as I was growing up, I watched Colorado kind of lead the race to the bottom in the United States when it came to the blueprint and the playbook for everything not to do when it comes to your state, adopting the worst policies from every other state imaginable, but also coming up with some really bad policies on their own. And really, this started taking a huge turn around 2012 when I was in high school, and throughout my college experience when I was a student at Colorado State University, just continued to become out of control. It's become a state that I don't really recognize and frankly doesn't represent the values that I grew up with in my beautiful home state that is easily the most beautiful state in all of the lower 48. I say that because Alaska has us trumped there and why I want to move to Alaska for one of many reasons. But one of the reasons that I've really been noticing this trend is Denver's approach to crime, Denver's approach to the homelessness epidemic, and in particular, Denver's approach to drug use recreationally. We all know what happened in 2012 with the state of Colorado becoming tied with Washington to be the first state to legalize recreational marijuana use. That has now exploded into basically the wild, wild west, so to speak. You can pretty much get away with anything in the city of Denver when it comes to drugs, and nothing is ever going to happen to you because of it. And we've approached this in Colorado, not we, I should say. I'm not a part of this, because if this was up to me, we'd be doing something dramatically differently. But the state of Colorado has approached this from a really bizarre point of view, where everything goes, you do whatever you want, we're just here to support you, and we're going to build these things called safe injection sites all over the city of Denver. You guys might recognize that term because they have these in many cities across Europe. They have them in many, many, many major blue cities in America now. But the idea is the government will subsidize clean needles for you to use to make sure that you're not going to die when you inject yourself with heroin. We're going to make sure that you're supervised with government approved and probably funded clean needles to do that. And just in case you happen to overdose, we'll have people there who can take care of you to make sure that you don't die. Apparently, this idea came about when I was in high school and college as a way to curb drug abuse and to curb overdoses, which logically just does not add up or line up for me whatsoever. If you are presenting an opportunity to do more of something in a controlled environment, how would that decrease the ability to do that thing, or how would that disincentivize people from doing that thing? But the idea of safe injection sites has now, in my opinion, ballooned so far out of control that it's no longer relegated to just these sites. It's how the city of Denver is approaching drug use as a social construct at all. So again, I got sent this link from my friend Maggie, who grew up in Colorado with me when I was home in Colorado over Christmas, and honestly wanted to throw up a little bit. I still do every single time I read this, from this nonprofit organization called the Harm Reduction Action Center. And I don't want to speak for the Harm Reduction Action Center. I want them to be able to speak for themselves so that you can see what basically the wet dream of most of these really, really blue cities looks like going into the rest of the 2020s in the drug epidemic. Spoiler alert, it's not trying to decrease it one bit at all. We are normalizing everything because it's so important to culturally and societally just normalize everything. So again, I'm not going to speak for the Harm Reduction Action Center. Let's let them speak for themselves in their own words. Instagram apologies if it gets a little cut off, but we're just going to play with it. This is their website, the homepage of their website, with a giant needle dispensary situation, committed to public health. Right there on the front page of their website. If you are envisioning a nonprofit that is committed to public health as it approaches drug use, the name of the organization of which is the Harm Reduction Action Center, chat, one would think, unless I'm crazy, right, that this organization would be dedicated to helping people do less drugs, right? If you're trying to reduce harm and take action to reduce harm, you're probably trying to decrease drug addiction rates. You're probably trying to decrease the amount of drugs that are out there in your environment. And you're probably trying to educate people on why rampant drug use and the proliferation of rampant drug use is a really bad idea for your community. One would think, but sadly, not the reality here. They say the Harm Reduction Action Center promotes public health by ensuring that people who inject drugs are educated and equipped with the tools to reduce the spread of communicable diseases, such as HIV, hepatitis, and eliminate the proliferation of fatal overdoses. Interesting. I happen to note this little segment here, and we're going to come back to that. People who inject drugs. Just seems like a little bit of a weird way to phrase that, but okay. So we're trying to decrease overdoses. We want to eliminate overdoses. You have me. I'm on board. We want to reduce the spread of HIV and Hep C. Great. You have me. I'm on board. And then immediately, our site provides syringe access. Okay, well, if you're really trying to decrease overdoses and if you're really trying to eliminate the spread of very, very terrible illnesses, why would you encourage drug use? This is the part that logically just doesn't make sense in my brain and never will when it comes to these safe injection sites. But this isn't even the part of the story I want to focus on. We're just going to get through their synopsis here, okay? Our fixed site provides syringe access to participants in our Denver program Monday through Friday from 9 to noon. We do health education, street outreach, presentations, meetings, and administrative time happens each afternoon. We take our commitment to public health and harm reduction seriously and meet our participants where they are at in the spectrum of their drug use. So now gender is not the only spectrum that happens to be out there. Drug use also happens to fall along a spectrum now because we got to make sure we have the lingo correct. In addition to our syringe access program, our compassionate harm reduction trained staff helps participants take active stock in their own health and welfare by connecting participants with our core services. So up to this point, you might agree with me when it comes to the safe injection site concept that it's wildly bizarre that we would be encouraging people to use drugs while we're simultaneously trying to disincentivize them from using drugs. Or you might think safe injection sites are the best idea ever. I don't know where you're at with that, and we can have that conversation. I think that's important. And don't forget to utilize our live chat in the process of doing that. But here's where things get really, really weird from the Harm Reduction Action Center. So if you go to the little side tab on their website and you say, okay, we need some more things to figure out about this organization, you can see a whole list of what they do. What we do, frequently asked questions, resources in Espanol, we love Espanol. You can do a virtual tour, or you can click this magical thing called downloadable resources. These are the downloadable resources in English. Little infographics, fun, interesting things, and this is what just sent me over the edge when it was sent to me by my awesome friend. Just bear with me, okay? There's a lot to go through. Here's a cute little graphic about harm reduction for benzos. Let's read, shall we? Lots of people recreationally use benzodiazepines like Xanax, or are prescribed benzos and recreationally use other drugs. Say that so casually, as if that's like the most normal thing in the entire world. If you want to stay safe, this guide is for you. They are commonly prescribed. Many people need benzodiazepines to manage stress and anxiety disorders. This means that this medication is intended to relieve anxiety and has sleep-inducing properties. Don't take too many or you're going to black out and have memory loss, but we put a fun exclamation point there on this cute little infographic to make that seem really normal. They are depressants. Like alcohol and opiates, benzos are a depressant. This means that combining things like Xanax, alcohol, and opiates can get deadly quickly. You can always take more, but you can't take less. They say start low, go slow. You can always take more, you can never take less. Remember, pills taken orally typically take around 45 minutes to kick in. Blacking out can happen quickly, so keep track of your dosing when you're casually just abusing benzodiazepines, theoretically that you've never been prescribed. Like, this is insane to me, right? So then you keep scrolling down. Fentanyl with 3 exclamation points. Everyone is talking about fentanyl, and yes, it is in our heroin and sometimes in our benzos. Fentanyl is a powerful opioid, and it causes someone to overdose, stop breathing really quickly. That's just the most casual way in the entire world of saying people are illegally lacing Xanax with fentanyl. People are taking it, and then you can just stop breathing. Like, is nobody else just completely weirded out by how this is worded to people? This is just the most casual mention of death I've ever seen. You can buy test strips to check your drugs for fentanyl, but your best bet if you use drugs or if your friends use drugs is to carry naloxone. I'm actually a huge fan of naloxone. I think everybody should carry Narcan, especially because you just never know what's been laced with fentanyl now. I've talked a lot about that on the stream and in some of my other content. But basically they're saying, don't worry about your addiction. Don't worry about abusing benzos. Just carry Narcan to make sure that if you overdose, we have time to get you to the hospital so that you don't die. But it's okay, because fentanyl's in everything with 3 exclamation points. And then if you keep scrolling down, there is this little cartoon of what appears to be an old school Game Boy Color. So this looks like it's for children, okay? Little cartoon of a gaming console, and he says, don't snort Xanax. It isn't water soluble, and it wastes your drugs. If you want to get high faster, crush your pills and put them under your tongue. Like, what? This is clearly oriented towards children, right? I'm not reading into that too much. It's a child's cartoon. Looks like it was drawn by a child, and it's encouraging people to get high on benzodiazepines faster to stop drug addiction, to stop drug overdose. We're going to help you learn how to get high faster. We're going to help you learn how to deal with becoming more addicted by saying, don't snort your Xanax because it's a waste of your drugs. If you really want to get high, crush up your pills and put them under your tongue, kids. Everything's great. Everything's great. CJ just said on Instagram, this is in caps madness. Yes, this is madness. Like, whatever happened to DARE? Dare to say no to drugs and alcohol. Did anybody else, chat, have to take DARE? I took DARE in 5th grade when I was living in Idaho. And I remember DARE scared me straight, okay? I remember everything I learned in DARE. I have never touched a single drug. Like, never had an inkling to even want to do that. We took a field trip when I was in DARE to go to juvie, and it was like the scariest day of my entire life. We actually spent the whole day at juvenile detention center in our area, and people were like yelling at us through their cells. We had lunch there. It was like the weirdest experience ever, but I guess we've moved so far beyond overcorrecting DARE to now just being like, hey kids, here's instructions on how to get high on Xanax, and it's probably also laced with fentanyl. So it's fine. It's just fine information. This blows my mind. Oh, but wait, it gets so much better. Like, you think that was bad from the Harm Reduction Action Center? It gets so much better. They have wild little infographics here that presumably are posted all over the internet and printed out and posted all over the city of Denver. We're not going to have time to go through all of them because I do have to leave for the airport here pretty soon, but I want you to just see a handful of them, and we'll end with my personal favorite one. This is what people who inject drugs need to know about COVID-19. This is a new illness. You do not have immunity. Well, gee, you don't say. That's fascinating information. What you need to know about hepatitis C. That you probably are going to get hepatitis if you keep injecting drugs. But come inject drugs at our friendly neighborhood drug injection site. What you need to know about meth and what it does for your brain. Basic harm reduction. Some people using stimulants inject more frequently and will need more supplies. So reduce harm of meth by getting more meth. Like, this is the part that I cannot seem to remotely wrap my head around. And speaking of meth, I read a totally different study from the state of Washington. The University of Washington out of Seattle did a huge study on drug presence in public places in the city of Seattle. Now, it is Seattle, so we shouldn't really be surprised. But essentially, they found methamphetamines on the surface of every public bus, on the transport, on everything in the city when it came to public transportation. Methamphetamines were everywhere. So in case you think meth is not all around us, apparently it is, especially if you live in a very large blue city. But I guess that's okay, because if you're addicted to meth, you can just use more meth in order to reduce harm. Fascinating. This is just wild. Review with this little smiley face on meth. People using methamphetamines and other stimulants may need help regulating the amount of stimulus their body is taking in. Empty, cool, neutral spaces can help someone in crisis. If you're on meth, we're not going to take you to the hospital. We're just going to take you to an empty, neutral, cold room. And then there's this cute drawing, methamphetamine, with a skull on a rose that looks like a tattoo design, but certainly is designed to help people not do meth. And here is the absolute best part of this entire thing, okay? This organization, this nonprofit, I've reiterated probably 12 times, but I need to keep saying, is an organized nonprofit dedicated to reducing the amount of drug abuse in the city of Denver. Okay, that's apparently their one MO in life. How they're doing that is extremely questionable, but we read it for ourselves. We read their mission statement that they are specifically trying to reduce the spread of illness through injectable drugs like hepatitis or HIV, and they want to eliminate, that is their own word, eliminate drug overdoses from opioids like fentanyl. They don't want that to happen anymore. Really, honestly, noble goal. They're going about it completely the wrong way, But in the process of decreasing illness and the spread of illness and the spread of these viruses and eliminating fentanyl overdoses, this is the priority of Denver's Harm Reduction Action Center. And this is the blueprint for the priorities of every single major blue city in America and presumably the Western world, Western civilization, going into the 2020s, illustrated more perfectly than I ever could have imagined. They have on their website a person-first language guide, because it's important how we talk about people who are addicted to drugs, because we don't want them to feel disincentivized from using drugs. We don't want them to feel like that's not a valid way to live their truth. So here's how we're supposed to talk about people who are addicted to drugs in the future. And I know the text is really, really small, so we're going to read this together, because I was crying, like actually crying, sad tears, because of how unbelievably pathetic this was the first time that I read this. This is the Harm Reduction Action Center's Person First Language Guide. And this is supposedly supposed to be used if you're providing a service, a resource, or support. So if any of you have a friend who is dealing with drug addiction, which is a very serious problem, and people often go to their friends looking for help and a way out of this, this is how you're supposed to talk to them. Number one, don't stigmatize. It says right over here, do not stigmatize. People frequently use less than friendly language to describe themselves. That's their prerogative. Do not correct people with lived experiences on their preferred way to refer to themselves. Use respectful language to show people who use drugs that you respect them with your words. So how are you supposed to not stigmatize? You use person-first language, which is a really common way of referring to the left's new playbook of talking, that you're not supposed to say anything unless you say the word person first. You have to re-emphasize their humanity. This started when I was in college on my college campus, and it just got completely out of control. You're supposed to say people of color, people experiencing homelessness, people blank, 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 right? Always say people first, because you have to re-emphasize that they are a person every time you talk about anything. People who use handicapped parking was actually in my school's inclusive language guide, instead of just saying somebody who's handicapped. Like the most ridiculous, out of this world way to talk that nobody ever would, but I digress. So how are we supposed to use this for drugs? People who use drugs, not drug addicts, not people experiencing addiction, people who use drugs. A person who uses or injects drugs can also be abbreviated because we need fun abbreviations for this. This can be used to describe any person who uses substances. Listen to this. Many people actively use substances. Yes, even daily! Exclamation point. And referring to non-problematic use as abuse implies a willful misconduct that has been shown to increase stigma and reduce the quality of care. So if you say to your friend that you're worried about them, and that they happen to be using drugs every single day, recreationally, even daily, they say in the guide here, that, hey, that's a little problematic and I'm worried about you and I want better for you, that's no anymore in culture. You're supposed to affirm this person's daily recreational use of illicit substances, because that's their lived truth. That's their lived experience. And you will really offend them if you try to say that daily use of methamphetamines or daily injections of heroin is really problematic for their lifestyle. I can't. They literally call this daily use of substances that is non-problematic use. Our new America, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep going. Substance abuse disorders. This term is defined in the DSM. Wow, they're actually using the diagnostic manual. That's surprising, because I thought we threw that out the window when it came out that gender dysphoria was in the DSM. So they're actually using the DSM, so good for you on that, I guess. In the past, okay, so that implies we're changing things in the future. In the past, this has been referred to as addiction. We're not supposed to call it addiction anymore, even though that's literally the medical term for it. Instead of addiction, you should say person with a substance use disorder. A substance use disorder refers to drug use that has in some way become problematic in a person's life, because there's recreational drug use that's not problematic in anyone's life. Much like other issues that arise, treating it with support, medication, and without stigma is the most effective strategy. Here's where it crosses over into problematic or chaotic use. This is how many people who are dependent on a substance or struggle with managing their drug use in a way that doesn't leave them vulnerable. That is like, you know what that reminds me of? You know when you were in elementary school or middle school or high school and you're desperately trying to hit the word count limit on your paper and you're like absolutely damn sure you are not going to hit the word count limit on your paper? There's just absolutely no way that's going to happen. That's what they just did. Instead of saying someone addicted to drugs or an addict, very simple way of saying that, they decided to say it as a person who is dependent on a substance or struggles with managing their drug use in a way that doesn't leave them vulnerable. In other words, an addict. Leave them vulnerable, prefer to refer to themselves to keep things less clinical as a problematic drug user. An addict. Some people prefer to be referred to as people experiencing chaotic use. The degrees to which people have been affected may vary and are most highly influenced, of course, by factors like race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and access to resources. So whether or not you are supposed to culturally refer to someone as a drug addict is now dependent on the color of their skin, their gender identity, who they decide to sleep with, etc. Yeah. Wah, wah. Everybody is saying in the chat, this is the most pathetic use of time and resources. Imagine the time it took to just type up this one document that's full of absolute nonsense, trying to hit the word limit on your paper vibes. The time and effort and resources that went into creating this poster could have been used to actually saving people's lives. Could have been used to actually decreasing drug addiction or actually reducing harm from overdoses or actually stopping the spread of hepatitis C or HIV. But this is the priority in Denver, right near where I grew up in a small town in Colorado, in 2024. This is the priority, and it will be the priority for every single other major blue city in America and around the world, in the Western world, if we don't treat this for what it is, which is just a laughingstock, literally. Coast by Coast just said on my Instagram chat, this is literally just a laughingstock. It is. It is. So just as a reminder, for person-first language for drug addiction moving forward, trigger warnings. The following section denotes words not to use if you've been stigmatized in the past. You don't need to read any further. Don't look if somebody has made fun of you in the past or somebody has said something that remotely offended you in the past. In the future, we're supposed to not use the words addiction, relapse, or hard and soft drugs. We absolutely are not supposed to use the words junkie, addict, even though addict is a very legitimate word for this, substance abuser, druggie, clean/dirty, or shooting gallery. Those are banned words in Denver now under the purview of this nonprofit. I do not have an intimate experience myself with struggling with addiction. I don't. I have family members who have and many friends who have, and it's definitely been a part of the world that I've grown up in. But call me crazy, and chat, feel free to weigh in on this for our last few minutes. If you are someone who has struggled with addiction, a huge part of your recovery is admitting that you had a problem, right? A huge part of being set free from addiction is letting yourself acknowledge, I have a problem. I am an addict. I need to figure out how not to relapse. Oh no, I'm using all the banned words. I'm using all the banned words. I need to figure out how not to relapse and figure out how to let myself free from this addiction. But the world we're creating now to decrease addiction now mandates that we don't ever even use that word. We've let ourselves be so out of control with the new language guides on college campuses and what's allowed to be said in community guidelines on social media, or these corporate language guides, maybe with your employer. And we've become so sensitive to what a word theoretically might offend somebody by saying that we're actually eliminating important words from society that matter in order to truly reduce harm reduction action center, because we're afraid of our own shadows. I genuinely just cannot begin to wrap my head around something like this. Nascent says relapse, addiction. I mean, what else would you call it? I don't think there is an alternative name for this. So frankly, from my perspective, the MO of this harm reduction action center certainly isn't to decrease the spread of viruses, and it certainly isn't to get rid of, eliminate overdoses from drug use. We're trying to remove from our vocabularies entirely words like addiction and relapse, because if we can remove concepts entirely from our vernacular language, from our dictionary, from how we speak to each other and communicate, then those concepts go away. My friend Yeonmi Park is a really phenomenally inspiring person. She grew up in North Korea, had the most harrowing journey of all time. If you've never read her book, highly, highly recommend. Escaping North Korea through China and then going to South Korea and eventually coming to America. And she talks a lot about how there are very eerie cultural parallels happening in the Western world, namely America now, with how she was raised in North Korea. And she used to tell me that there was never such thing as the word freedom. There's never such thing as the word liberty in North Korea. Nobody has a word for that because they've essentially erased the entire concept of what that word means by removing that word from the dictionary, from the vernacular language, from how people communicate with each other. If we remove the words addiction and relapse in the quest to fight drug addiction, honestly, the concept of addiction just ceases to exist, right? So really, it seems to me the end goal of these nonprofits and these advocacy groups, and frankly, public policy from the government, from the city of Denver, from the state of Colorado, who works quite often with this nonprofit organization, and any other state or city that's participating in this behavior, the end goal isn't to eliminate drug abuse. It isn't to eliminate overdoses. It's to normalize drug abuse and normalize overdoses to the point that you become so subdued that you are far easier to control, and it is far easier for them to hold on to power. I have watched this happen not just in the realm of drug addiction and trying to reduce harm for overdoses, but again, with rates of violent crime, with the homelessness epidemic, with public policy in general, throughout the state of Colorado in my entire childhood. And now Colorado, I believe, has led the race to the bottom on what America is capable of if we stop paying attention, if we don't even know that these resources are out there, if we don't even know that they're saying the quiet part out loud, and we aren't brave enough to speak up about it. Because here's the thing, in the midst of this nonprofit fighting drug addiction by just normalizing drug addiction and making sure we're aware of person first language more than anything else, this is what is happening in the city of Denver. This was published in January, today, or 2 days ago, January 9th, and it was re-updated January 10th, so yesterday of 2024. Denver saw a record number of overdose deaths in 2023. So it seems to me, scientifically speaking, if you're trying to fight drug addiction, you certainly aren't doing a very good job of it. And this came out last May, that Denver is among the most dangerous places to live in the United States of America because of rising violent crime. This was from the U.S. News and World Report. They announced their annual best places to live list last May in 2023. Denver fell in 1 year from number 55 on the list to 99th. 99th in 1 year. One factor that impacted Denver's ranking was crime statistics from the FBI, with Denver, Colorado, ultimately ranking as the 15th most dangerous place to live nationwide. They further elaborated on the topic, noting that the crime rate was much higher than that of a typical city of the same size. 479.1 violent crimes are committed per 100,000 people in Denver. In Chicago, the epicenter of violent crime, it's only 252.8. Almost 500, almost double the number of violent crimes per 100,000 people are committed in Denver compared to Chicago. Almost triple the property crime rate per 100,000 people is happening in Denver compared to Chicago. It's also worth noting, they said, that Denver's violent crime rate was well below the national violent crime rate until 2016, when most of these policies started going into effect. And right when we were considering a brand new change of leadership, right around those few years, in the governor's mansion in the state of Colorado. In 2016, Denver's rate of violent crime was roughly equal to the national rate. And now it has become one of the most dangerous places in America to live. This is real. This is not just my experience from growing up, but I've seen how many comments in the chat today from people who live in Denver. Professor Lycan says, I live and work in the center of this. I've witnessed a fentanyl death at the light rail, that's our subway basically, station, and have been attacked by drunks. It is bad, and the city is not doing anything about it. Greg says those changing the language are more concerned about feelings than solving real problems. This will not end well. Yeah. And nobody in the mainstream media, no other conversational commentator or podcaster or live stream host, nobody's talking about it because maybe we aren't even aware of it. The media certainly doesn't want us to be. If we're not aware of it, then we can't do anything about it. But if you don't want your city to look like this within the next couple of years, trust me from my lived experience, do absolutely everything that Denver and the state of Colorado have failed to do throughout my childhood and well into my adult years. All right, you guys, I'm 2 minutes over from my hard out time because I got to jet off to the airport for a really fun project. We will see you back for the stream very, very soon. Before you go, don't forget to give me a like on this episode of the stream so other people have an opportunity to be aware of this huge problem that nobody is talking about. That could look like a little thumbs up or a heart, depending on where you're watching. And before you go, huge, huge, huge thank you in advance for smashing that follow or subscribe button to help us continue to grow this community. You guys are the best. Off to the airport. Happy trails.